You walk through the atrium of the Temple of Vesta, and the marble is so polished it reflects the sacred fire like a river of gold. And the people who see you in your white linen stola trimmed with purple actually step back, not because they're required to, but because something in them recognizes divinity, or at least the performance of it so perfect it might as well be real. The fabric against your skin is finer than anything a senator's wife will ever touch, imported from somewhere distant and expensive, and it moves like water when you walk, and you've worn it so long you've forgotten what rough cloth feels like, forgotten what it means to be ordinary. You can free a condemned prisoner just by being present at their execution. Your word in court carries more weight than any man's oath, and if you're walking through the forum and a magistrate's procession approaches, they stop for you. They wait while you pass, because your virginity isn't just a personal state, it's a political force, a guarantee of Rome's divine favor. The fire behind you is always warm, has been burning for centuries, tended by you and your sister Vestals in shifts that never pause, never allow darkness. And sometimes, when you stand close to it, you think about how much power is concentrated in those flames, how the safety of the entire empire supposedly depends on you keeping that fire alive, keeping yourself pure, keeping the invisible contract between Rome and the gods intact. But there's something you've started to notice, a weight that has nothing to do with the heavy ceremonial wreaths you wear during festivals, and it's the understanding that this privilege is a cage made of expectations so high that any human would eventually fail to meet them, that the same fire you tend could consume you if you make a single mistake, if you're accused of a single impurity, if someone decides you've become more useful as a sacrifice than as a guardian. You feel it today, that shift in the air, the way the other Vestals won't quite meet your eyes during the morning rituals, the way the Pontifex Maximus looked at you with something that might be pity or might be calculation, and you understand with sudden cold clarity that something has been discovered or invented or decided, and the life you've known for 20 years is about to end in a way that has been designed specifically to be worse than death. You stand in the inner chamber while the Pontifex Maximus circles you slowly, and his eyes are doing something you've never experienced before. They're evaluating your body not as sacred vessel, but as evidence, as potential site of contamination, and you feel the shift from untouchable to violated happening in real time, even though no one has physically touched you yet. They remove your infula, the white and crimson ribbons that mark you as Vestal, and the absence of them makes your head feel light and exposed, makes you aware that your identity is being systematically stripped away, that without these symbols, you're just a woman who's been accused of something Rome considers worse than murder. The examination is conducted by priestesses, older women whose faces you can't quite see in the lamplight, and their hands are cold and professional, and they're checking for physical signs of lost virginity with a thoroughness that makes you understand this isn't about truth, it's about procedure, about having documentation that will justify whatever's already been decided. You used to walk on marble in sandals that were oiled and cleaned daily by temple slaves, and now you're barefoot on cold stone, and the temperature of it travels up through your body like a warning, like your feet are learning what the rest of you will soon experience, the complete removal of comfort and dignity. They take away the white stola and give you something rough and colorless, something that feels like punishment against skin that's only ever known luxury, and you catch a glimpse of yourself in the polished bronze mirror and don't recognize the woman looking back, see someone who's already been transformed from priestess to prisoner, from sacred to profane. And the transition happened so quickly, you're still trying to understand when exactly you stopped being protected and started being processed. The Pontifex Maximus is making notes on a wax tablet, recording observations in that same bureaucratic efficiency you've seen him use for temple inventories and festival schedules, and you realize that your body, your life, your death are all just administrative matters to be handled according to established protocols, that there's a procedure for this that's been refined over centuries, and you're just the latest person to be fed into a system that knows exactly how to dispose of women who've become inconvenient. You're moved to a cell that's still within the temple complex, but might as well be on a different continent. A small room with no windows, where the only light comes from a single lamp that burns oil that smells wrong, cheap, nothing like the sacred fire you've tended all these years. The other Vestals won't come near you now, and it's not cruelty exactly, it's survival, because association with you has become dangerous, because your impurity is treated as contagious, and when you see them passing in the corridor, they look through you with the practiced blindness of people who've learned not to see things that might implicate them. You think about your family, wonder if they've been told, wonder if they'll try to intervene, and then you remember that when you became a Vestal at age 6 or 7, you were legally removed from your family's authority, became property of the state, became Rome's daughter, and now Rome has decided you're no longer a daughter, but a problem that needs to be solved. The isolation is worse than you expected, not because you're physically alone, but because you're surrounded by people who are actively choosing to not acknowledge your existence, who are participating in your erasure while you're still alive to witness it, and you start to understand that this is part of the punishment, that the loneliness is deliberate, designed to break you before the actual execution, to make you complicit in your own destruction by accepting that you deserve this abandonment. You can hear the city outside, the normal sounds of Rome going about its business, merchants calling out prices, and carts rattling over stone, and children laughing, and those sounds feel like they're coming from a different world, a world you used to inhabit but can no longer access, and the distance between you and normal life is measured not in feet, but in the unbridgeable gap between the living and the already condemned. They bring you food, but you can't eat it, bring you water, but your throat won't swallow, and your body seems to understand before your mind fully accepts it that there's no point in sustaining yourself, that the ritual that's coming doesn't require you to be healthy or strong, just alive enough to be buried, conscious enough to experience what's about to happen. But if you think the loss of your title was the worst part, you haven't yet understood what happened when the litter was closed and the procession toward the gate began. You're placed in a covered litter, the kind normally used for transporting corpses, and the curtains are drawn so tight that no light gets in, no air moves properly, and you can hear the bearers lifting you, but you can't see anything, can only feel the swaying motion, and smell your own fear sweat mixing with the scent of the fabric. The procession moves through Rome in complete silence, which is worse than if they were shouting or throwing things, because the silence means this is sacred, means the city is treating your execution as a religious necessity rather than a punishment, and you can hear that silence even through the thick curtains, can feel the weight of thousands of people watching without speaking as you're carried toward the Campus Scaleratus, the cursed field outside the city walls where Rome buries Vestals alive. The litter sways and you're trying to breathe normally, but the air inside is getting thin and hot, and you're aware of your own heartbeat in a way you've never been before, aware that each beat is bringing you closer to the moment when beating will no longer be necessary, when your body will become evidence of divine judgment rather than a living thing that wants desperately to continue living. When the litter finally stops and the curtains open, the light is blinding even though it's late afternoon, and you see the hole in the ground, see the wooden stairs descending into earth, and your mind refuses to process it for a moment, refuses to accept that this engineered darkness is meant for you, that you're supposed to walk down into it voluntarily. There are officials here, the Pontifex Maximus and his attendants, and they're maintaining that same bureaucratic efficiency, that same professional distance that allows them to participate in horror without feeling horror. And you understand that they've done this before, that this ritual has been performed enough times that everyone knows their role, knows exactly how to orchestrate a living burial with proper religious protocol. The crowd is massive, but perfectly quiet, and you can see their faces, see that mixture of fear and fascination, see that they're watching not because they want you to die, but because witnessing this somehow makes them safer, confirms that the gods are being appeased, that Rome's purity is being maintained through your elimination. And she wasn't the only one. This is what matters. Because Rome didn't just punish a woman, it performed a surgical removal of a soul to appease a silent goddess who never asked for blood, but received it anyway, in forms designed to look like mercy. There was Cornelia, accused under Domitian's reign, not because anyone truly believed she'd broken her vows, but because the emperor needed to demonstrate his commitment to traditional Roman morality after years of his own debauchery, needed a visible sacrifice to prove that his rule was restoring the old values. They say she maintained perfect composure when they came for her, that she arranged her stola carefully as she descended the stairs so she wouldn't trip, wouldn't give them the spectacle of stumbling or begging, and even the Pontifex Maximus, who presided over her burial, reportedly turned his face away when she called out one final time, declaring her innocence to the gods. The dignity of her descent was its own form of resistance, the only protest available to someone whose voice had been legally invalidated, whose testimony didn't matter because the political need for her death had already overridden any concern for her actual guilt or innocence. She went down into the earth, still insisting she was pure, still believing that the gods knew the truth even if Rome had decided to ignore it. And the officials who sealed her in worked quickly and professionally, fulfilling their religious duty with the same efficiency they brought to any other state ceremony, treating her living burial as just another item on the calendar of sacred obligations. The crowd that day was larger than usual because everyone understood they were watching political theater disguised as religious necessity, were seeing an emperor use ancient ritual to consolidate modern power. And Cornelia became a symbol even as she suffocated, became a story that people would whisper about for generations, though whether those whispers condemned Rome or justified it depended entirely on who was telling the story. The other one, whose name barely survived in fragmentary records, was a younger Vestal who'd committed a different kind of crime, had let the sacred fire go out during her watch, had fallen asleep or become distracted, or simply failed in the one fundamental duty that justified her entire existence. The fire dying was interpreted as divine abandonment, as proof that the gods had withdrawn their favor, and the speed of her trial was remarkable even by Roman standards, as if keeping her alive one moment longer than necessary would further anger the deities who'd already shown their displeasure through the extinguished flame. They say she didn't understand at first that the punishment for negligence was the same as the punishment for sexual impurity, thought perhaps she'd be whipped or exiled, but surely not killed for what was essentially an accident, a moment of human weakness in a role that demanded inhuman perfection. The chamber they put her in was darker than most because she was buried at night, as if the timing somehow mirrored her crime, as if sending her into permanent darkness was appropriate punishment for allowing darkness to enter the temple. And the lamp they left with her was small and cheap, would burn out within hours, leaving her to experience in death the same absence of light she'd permitted in life. No one recorded her last words or whether she screamed or prayed or simply sat in silence waiting for the air to run out, and that absence of documentation tells you everything about whose suffering Rome considered worth remembering, whose stories deserved preservation, and whose could be discarded along with the bodies they described.